Good morning, everyone. Welcome back, or maybe welcome for the first time. Wherever you're coming from right now, whatever brought you here today, I'm glad you're here. Take a breath, settle in. This one is for you. You didn't give up. Let that sit for a second. When everyone else, maybe even a version of yourself, was telling you to walk away, to close the door, to stop looking back, you didn't. Mm. And that's not weakness. That's not desperation dressed up as loyalty. That is something far more specific, far more psychologically complex, and honestly far more honest than most people are willing to be about what they feel. You know what you feel, and you've refused to pretend otherwise. And that takes a particular kind of courage that the world doesn't celebrate enough, the courage to stay true to something that hasn't resolved yet. To hold space for a possibility without collapsing into it, to want something real without letting the wanting consume you. That's where you've been living. And today, let's talk about what that might actually mean for what's ahead. Because the energy around this connection, the one you've been holding in your chest like something fragile and irreplaceable, might be moving. Not loudly, not dramatically. Um, but the way a season changes gradually, then all at once, something in this dynamic could be reaching a turning point. And the question isn't just whether they're ready. The question, the more important one, is whether you know what a fresh start actually requires from you. Because fresh starts are not erasure. That's the part nobody warns you about. A fresh start doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It doesn't mean the hurt wasn't real, that the silence didn't cost you, that the confusion didn't leave marks. It means you're both possibly choosing to pick up the pen and write something different, not on a blank page, on a page that already has history on it. And writing something new on a page with history requires more skill, more intention, more honesty than starting from nothing ever does. Um, so let's go there. Let's actually go there. What might be happening on their end right now could look something like this. And stay with me because this is the part that tends to be hard to hear when you want something so much. They might be in a war with themselves. Not about whether they caring might not actually be the issue. The issue might be something quieter and more complicated. It might be about fear, about the specific fear that comes from wanting something badly enough that losing it again feels unsurvivable. And so instead of moving toward you, instead of saying the thing, making the move, closing the distance they stall, they rationalize. They find reasons why the timing isn't right, why they need more time, why they should wait until they're more certain. Mm. And from where you're standing, that can look a lot like indifference. It can feel like you're the only one who cares. Like you're out here holding something alone that was supposed to be shared. And that feeling is valid, that feeling is real, and it also might not be the complete picture. Because the people who truly don't care, they don't hesitate. They don't stall. They don't go quiet in the specific way that still feels loud. They just leave cleanly without the residue. And if this person has left residue, if this connection still hums with something unfinished, then what you might be sensing isn't a fantasy you've constructed. It might be a reality that hasn't fully materialized yet, um, and there is a difference. This reflection invites you to consider what would it mean to want a fresh start without needing them to be a different person than they are. Not a better version, not the version they were before things got complicated. But this version, the one that's uncertain, maybe a little bruised, possibly still figuring out how to be brave enough to reach. Can you want a fresh start with that person? Or are you holding out for a version of them that might not be who actually shows up? Because the answer to that question changes everything about how you move forward. Let's talk about what never giving up actually looks like in practice. Um, because I think there might be a version of it that serves you and a version of it that quietly costs you. And knowing the difference is possibly the most important thing you could walk away with today. Never giving up in its healthiest form looks like this: you hold the door open internally, you remain available to the possibility. You don't build walls specifically designed to keep this person out. You stay honest with yourself about what you feel, and you continue to build your life with full investment, full presence, full energy, not on pause, not in a waiting room, but actually living, actually growing, actually becoming, while remaining open to this connection, finding its way back. Um, that version of never giving up is powerful, it's grounded, it keeps you whole. Uh, but there's another version, and it's worth looking at directly. The version where never giving up becomes a reason to stop investing in yourself, where the open door becomes an excuse to not explore other rooms, where holding space for them starts to take up so much of your internal real estate that there's no room left for the new things trying to enter your life, where loyalty to the potential of this connection starts to function as a ceiling rather than a foundation. That version, as beautiful as it feels from the inside, as righteous as it can seem, might actually be the thing that keeps both of you stuck. Because energy that's fully allocated has no room to surprise you. And life, real life, tends to deliver its best things through the spaces you didn't know you had. This reflection invites you to consider: are you holding space for this person? Or have you been holding your entire life hostage to this one outcome? And if it's the latter, not as a judgment, as an honest observation, what would it look like to loosen that grip just enough to let some air in? Not to give up, never to give up, but to hold it differently. Um, to carry it in an open hand rather than a closed fist. Now, what might a fresh start actually require structurally, psychologically, if it comes? Because wanting it is one thing, being ready to build it correctly is another. And the gap between those two things is where most reconnections quietly fail the second time. A fresh start between two people with history requires, at minimum, three things: um, honesty about what actually happened, not the story you've each been telling yourselves, but the actual sequence of events and the actual feelings underneath them. Um, Not to relitigate, not to assign blame, but to name it clearly enough that you're not building something new on a foundation of unspoken resentment and unprocessed hurt. Because unspoken things don't disappear, they migrate, They show up later as overreactions, as withdrawal, as the specific kind of distance that appears without explanation and baffles you both. It requires new agreements, not the implicit, assumed agreements you were operating under before, the ones neither of you actually articulated but both expected the other to follow. New agreements, explicit ones. What does this look like now? What do we each need? What are the limits of what we can offer? What does showing up mean in this version of the connection? Those conversations are uncomfortable. They're also the only conversations that actually protect what you're trying to build. And it requires, possibly the hardest one, a willingness to forgive without using forgiveness as a performance. Real forgiveness isn't a gesture, it's not something you announce. It's a daily practice of choosing not to weaponize the past when the present gets difficult, of extending the same grace to them that you'd want extended to you in your worst moments, of deciding repeatedly that the future you're building together is worth more than being right about the past. That's not easy. That's actually one of the hardest things two people can do. And it's also possibly one of the most extraordinary. Uh, Here's what I want you to hear clearly, directly, without softening it into something easier. You deserve a love that doesn't require you to constantly prove your worth. You deserve a connection where the desire to try again is mutual, not performed, not coerced, not arrived at because one of you wore the other down. Mutual, chosen, returned. And if this person is moving toward that, if underneath the silence and the hesitation and the complicated history, there is a genuine desire to show up differently, then what might be coming could be something worth the wait, something built on a foundation that actually holds this time. Um, because the second attempt, done honestly, can be stronger than the first ever was. The cracks become the places where the light gets in. The history becomes the depth that a brand new connection simply cannot manufacture. And this matters only if you both choose it, um, actively, consciously, not by default, not by inertia, not because breaking up again feels too exhausting, by choice, real choice, the kind that comes from clarity rather than fear. This reflection invites you to consider, if this person came to you tomorrow and said, I want to try again, what would you need to hear from them to actually believe it? Not to test them, not to punish them, but to genuinely, structurally believe that this time could be different. What would that look like? What would it sound like? And are you willing to ask for it clearly, without apology, without shrinking, instead of hoping they figure it out on their own? Because here's the thing about never giving up. The most powerful version of it isn't silent endurance. It isn't waiting in the shadows, hoping they find their way back. The most powerful version is knowing exactly what you want, being willing to say it, and being equally willing to walk away if what comes back doesn't meet that standard. That's not giving up. That's having enough respect for the connection and for yourself to refuse to settle for a half version of it. You want a fresh start. That's real. That's valid. That might be exactly what's available. And the version of you who receives it, who builds it, who sustains it, that version needs to be the most honest, most grounded, most self aware version of you that exists. Not the version that's been running on hope alone, the version that hopes and knows their worth, hopes and holds a standard, loves and maintains themselves. Uh, that version of you is already here, has always been here. The power is yours. It always has been. Whatever this connection becomes, whether it finds its way back to you in the form of something new and honest, or whether it teaches you something irreplaceable about what you're capable of feeling and choosing and surviving, you are not diminished by having loved this. You are not foolish for holding on. You are not weak for wanting more. Um, you are a person who knows what they feel and refuses to pretend otherwise. In a world that constantly asks us to perform indifference, that is quietly radical. Take what resonates, softly release the rest, trust yourself. Okay, so Virgo, tell me in the comments, what does a real fresh start mean to you? What would need to be different this time? I want to hear your version of it. And what's the one thing you've never actually said to this person that you wish they knew? Drop it below. Sometimes just writing it out changes something. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself for real, not just today. Bye.